This story comes from a woman named Nicole, who lives in Portland, Oregon. When she first reached out, she made it clear that she wasn't looking for attention. She said she just needed to write it somewhere, to put it out of her head. The things she heard and saw in that house still keep her awake at night, even though she moved out more than a year ago. Nicole had just gone through a divorce. She'd spent years in a busy apartment in the middle of the city, and she wanted a quieter life, something slower, calmer. She found a small, older home on the outskirts of Portland, tucked into a quiet suburban street where the houses all looked the same. White fences, trimmed lawns, the smell of pine after rain. It wasn't a dream home, but it felt safe. At least, at first. The house had 3 bedrooms, wooden floors that creaked in certain spots, and a narrow hallway that led to the laundry room, where a door sat flush against the far wall. It was locked with a simple latch and an old padlock, rusted from years of moisture. The real estate agent mentioned it casually when showing her around. "That's just the basement. Nothing special down there. It's unfinished, storage mostly. I think the last owner sealed it off after some flooding years back." Nicole didn't ask any more questions. She was focused on moving in, unpacking boxes, and starting over. For the first week, everything was normal. She spent her evenings repainting the living room, drinking tea on the porch, getting used to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. But by the second week, she began to notice something strange. Every night around 2 or 3 a.m., when the house was silent and still, she'd hear a faint sound. It wasn't pipes or creaking wood. It wasn't wind through the trees. It sounded human. At first, she described it as a muffled cry, a small, fragile sound, almost like someone sobbing from far away. But the more she listened, the more distinct it became. It wasn't an adult crying. It was the sound of a baby. Nicole said she froze the first time she realized it. She sat up in bed, listening, holding her breath. The sound came in short bursts, then faded, like it was echoing through layers of floorboards and walls. She checked the street outside, thinking maybe it was coming from a neighbor's house or someone walking with a stroller. But the road was empty, and the sound was definitely coming from inside her home. The next morning, she brushed it off. Old houses made weird noises all the time. But when it happened again the following night, same time, same sound, she began to feel a cold, crawling unease settle in her chest. She tried to trace where it came from. She'd walked through the house in the dark, barefoot, holding her phone flashlight low. Every time she got close to the laundry room, the sound would stop. Then, as soon as she turned away, it would start again, faint and distant, like it was mocking her. Nicole wrote in her email that she started to feel watched, though she couldn't explain why. There was no one there, no signs of a break-in. Just that door, that locked, heavy basement door. She told herself not to overthink it. Maybe it was the pipes, maybe water moving under the floor. But she admitted she avoided the laundry room after sunset. Even during the day, she could feel something off about that part of the house. The air felt cooler, heavier. Sometimes she'd swear she could smell something faintly sweet, almost metallic when she walked by. 2 weeks later, she finally decided to record it. She placed her phone near the door around midnight and left it running for half an hour. When she listened the next morning, her stomach turned. There it was, the same soft cry. But halfway through the recording, another sound appeared. A whisper. It was faint, buried under the static, but unmistakably human. She replayed it several times until the words became clear. "Don't wake her up." Nicole said she dropped her phone the second she understood what it said. She didn't tell anyone, not her coworkers, not her sister, not even her mother. She just stayed up that night with every light in the house on, waiting for morning. For the next few days, nothing happened. She thought maybe it was over. Maybe the house had just been playing tricks on her. But then, on a Sunday night near the end of October, the crying returned. This time it was louder. Closer, Nicole described it like it was right beneath her, coming from under the floorboards, directly below her bed. She said she could even feel a faint vibration, like something shifting slowly in the dark. When she finally got the courage to walk down the hallway and stand in front of the basement door, the crying stopped. And for a moment, everything was silent. Then came another sound, a single, slow knock from behind the door. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to make her blood run cold. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, she called the real estate agent and asked again about the house's history. The woman hesitated before answering. Apparently, the house had belonged to an older couple before it went vacant. They'd lived there for decades, but after their daughter died during childbirth, the wife had grown distant. Some neighbors said she lost her mind. The husband eventually sold the place after she passed away, claiming he couldn't stand to live there anymore. When Nicole asked if they had children, the agent said quietly, "They did, but the baby didn't survive." After that call with the real estate agent, Nicole couldn't shake the feeling that something in the house was still tied to that story. She kept telling herself it was all coincidence, that the crying was a mix of wind, plumbing, and imagination. But deep down, she already knew it wasn't that simple. That night, she sat in the living room with her laptop, searching for anything related to the property's history. It didn't take long to find a few old mentions buried in archived newspapers. A death notice from 1989 for a woman named Margaret Ellery, listed at the same address. No cause of death mentioned. Then another. Just a year later, her husband, Thomas Ellery, sold the property suddenly and moved to another state. Nicole didn't sleep after that. For the first time, she started to feel that the house itself was listening. The air had that kind of silence that feels aware, the kind that presses against your ears when you try to listen harder. Every creak, every hum of the refrigerator felt louder now. On the third night after that discovery, she heard the crying again. It started faintly at 2:14 a.m., just like before. She sat up, listening, and this time she decided to follow it. She turned on her phone's flashlight and walked slowly down the hall. The sound grew clearer with each step, a soft wailing, rising and falling, almost rhythmic. When she reached the laundry room, the crying stopped. Then, from behind the basement door, came a quiet scratching sound. Something, or someone, was moving down there. Her hand hovered over the old padlock. It was cold, slick with condensation. She almost turned the latch, but something deep in her gut told her not to. Instead, she backed away, turned off the light, and locked herself in her room until sunrise. The next morning, Nicole finally called the police. She explained that she kept hearing noises coming from her basement and that she thought maybe someone was living down there. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, but agreed to send an officer. 2 uniformed cops arrived around 9 a.m. They were polite, professional, and seemed amused when she mentioned the crying. Still, they broke the padlock and opened the basement door. A thick wave of musty cold air rolled up from below. Nicole stayed by the stairs, hugging herself as they went down with flashlights. After about 5 minutes, one of them called up, "Ma'am, there's nothing here." The other officer climbed back up, brushing dust off his sleeves. The basement, he said, was empty, just cracked concrete, some old shelves, and a few plastic bins full of junk. But then he added something strange. Though, there are some old toys down here. Dolls, rattles, looks like baby stuff. Kinda creepy, honestly." Nicole's stomach turned. She asked if she could see. They let her peek from the doorway. In the corner, she saw them. Tiny objects covered in dust. A stuffed bear missing one eye, a cracked baby bottle, and a rusted metal crib with cobwebs clinging to its bars. The officer shrugged. Probably left by the last owners. Nothing unusual. They replaced the padlock before leaving, told her to call if she heard anything again. But Nicole didn't feel reassured. She said the basement felt wrong, like the air itself didn't belong to the same house. Even standing by the doorway, she could feel a subtle vibration in the floorboards, as if the earth beneath the foundation was breathing. That night she tried something different. Instead of recording audio, she set up her phone camera facing the basement door and let it record while she slept. She didn't expect much. The next morning, she opened the footage. For the first few hours, nothing moved. The light stayed dim, steady. Then, at 2:15 a.m., the screen flickered slightly, like the motion sensor caught something. In the corner of the frame, the doorknob shifted. Barely noticeable, but it moved. Once, twice, then stopped. And right after that, the crying began. Faint, but picked up clearly by the microphone. She could hear it echoing softly for about 30 seconds. Then the audio warped, like static. And in the last few seconds of the clip, a shadow passed in front of the camera, thin, quick, and human-shaped. But too small to be an adult. Nicole stopped watching. She closed her laptop and sat in silence for a long time, her heart hammering. When she tried to replay the footage later that day, the file wouldn't open. It said, corrupted. The crying she'd heard, the shadow, it was all gone. By the end of that week, Nicole had reached her limit. She stopped sleeping in her bedroom and moved to the living room couch, as far away from the basement as possible. But even there, she could still hear faint noises, little taps, like fingernails scratching wood. She said one night, as she dozed off, she felt something brush against her ankle. When she opened her eyes, nothing was there. Just the dim light from the street filtering through the blinds. But when she looked toward the hallway, she thought she saw something. A shape standing near the laundry room, too dark to make out, too still to be real. She blinked, and it was gone. After weeks of sleepless nights, Nicole finally broke down. The sounds hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown more unpredictable. Some nights there would be crying, other nights just a faint humming, almost like a lullaby being sung from underground. Once or twice, she heard what she described as soft thumping, as though someone were pacing slowly in the basement. She stopped recording, stopped trying to prove it. All she wanted now was for it to stop. A co-worker she trusted, one of the few people she had even told about it, suggested she speak to someone from a local church. Portland had no shortage of small community congregations, and one of the pastors, a man named Reverend Collins, was known to visit homes to bless them after deaths or tragedies. Nicole hesitated. She wasn't religious, and she didn't want to sound insane. But when she woke up one morning to find the basement door slightly ajar, even though she had locked it the night before, she decided it was time. She called the church that same afternoon. Reverend Collins arrived the next day, just before dusk. He was in his late 50s, calm and polite, with that kind of steady voice that makes people feel safe. Nicole led him through the house, explaining everything as plainly as she could. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When they reached the laundry room, he paused in front of the basement door. His hand hovered over the doorknob for a long moment before he finally said, "Sometimes places remember pain. It lingers, the same way scent does. You can clean it, paint over it, but it's still there in the air. Then he asked for a few minutes alone. Nicole waited in the kitchen, listening to the faint murmur of his prayer through the walls. The house felt heavier, like the air had thickened. For a brief moment, she swore she could smell that same faint, metallic sweetness again, the one she'd noticed near the door weeks earlier. Then, from behind the closed door, something knocked back. Just once. A dull, hollow sound, like someone tapping wood from deep below. The prayer stopped. Nicole's chest tightened. She called out, asking if everything was okay. The Reverend opened the door slowly, his expression unreadable. "It's fine," he said, "but I'd like to finish this blessing before sunset." He sprinkled holy water along the frame of the door and said another short prayer, this time louder. When he was done, he looked at Nicole and asked if she had anything belonging to a child, a toy, a photo, anything left by the previous owners. She thought for a moment, then remembered the old toys the police had found. They were still in the basement, or so she thought. But when she opened the door with the new key, the space at the bottom of the stairs was empty. The crib, the toys, the bottles, all gone. There was only the smell, strong, cold, metallic, like old blood and rust. The Reverend frowned but said nothing. He closed the door again and told her it might be best to avoid going down there for a while. "Let it settle," he said quietly. "Sometimes attention feeds things like this." Nicole nodded, though she didn't really understand what he meant. For a few nights after the blessing, the house fell silent. No crying, no whispers, no movement from below. Nicole finally slept. She started to believe it was over. But peace never lasts long in stories like this. On the 5th night, she woke abruptly. The house was still, but something felt wrong, like the quiet itself had a pulse. When she glanced toward the hallway, she noticed a faint glow near the laundry room door. At first, she thought it was moonlight reflecting off the floor, until she realized it was coming from the bottom of the door itself. A soft, bluish light seeping through the crack where the floor met the wood. And faintly beneath it all, a sound. Not crying this time. Breathing. Slow, steady, shallow. Like someone was standing right behind the door, exhaling against the wood. Nicole couldn't move. She sat frozen in bed, every muscle tight. After a long moment, the light flickered and vanished. The breathing stopped. When she finally worked up the courage to check, the door was still locked, but the air was freezing cold. Her breath came out visible, misty, even though the rest of the house was warm. The next morning, she called the Reverend again, but he didn't answer. She left a message, trying to sound calm. That same day, she found out through the church receptionist that he had fallen ill suddenly the night after visiting her house. They didn't say with what, only that he was in the hospital and wouldn't be taking calls. That night, Nicole sat at her kitchen table for hours, staring down the hallway toward the basement door. The silence was unbearable. She began talking out loud, just to fill the air, to convince herself she wasn't alone. But then, faintly, almost too quiet to be real, she heard something answer. It wasn't a word, not exactly, more like a sound trying to imitate one. A whisper that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. "Mama!" Nicole stood so quickly that the chair fell backward. She stumbled toward the front door, but before she could reach it, there was a sharp thud from the laundry room. Then another. The third thud came from directly below her feet. She ran outside into the cold night air and didn't come back until sunrise. Nicole didn't sleep that night. She spent the early morning sitting in her car, parked across the street, just staring at her house through the windshield. The sun rose pale and gray over Portland, and the house looked normal again. Too normal. Like it hadn't just tried to whisper her name. She told herself she would leave, pack a few things, find a hotel, and call a realtor in the morning. But when she stepped inside, the air felt different. The smell was gone. The house was warm again, almost welcoming. Maybe it had just been stress. Maybe she really had imagined all of it. She made coffee, opened the curtains, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt peaceful. She even laughed a little at herself, the way fear can twist everything into a story. That's when she noticed the envelope. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, right where she always dropped her keys. Old paper, edges yellowed. No name, no address, just a faint watermark, like something pressed into the surface years ago. She didn't remember seeing it before. When she picked it up, she noticed a light, powdery dust clinging to her fingertips, the kind that only comes from something that's been sitting untouched for a long time. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded note, written in shaky handwriting. "Please, if you hear her cry, don't open the door. We tried to move her, but she doesn't rest. She's waiting for her mother." Nicole froze. The handwriting wasn't new. It looked aged, faded. The paper itself smelled faintly of damp wood and iron. She turned the envelope over and realized it wasn't sealed with glue, but with something dark that had dried into a thin crust, something that looked disturbingly like blood. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, faint and rasped, spoke on the other end. "Nicole!" She felt her stomach drop. It was a man's voice, strained, barely audible. "Who is this?" she asked. There was a long pause. Then, "This is Reverend Collins. I need to ask, have you been downstairs again?" Nicole's voice cracked. "No. Why? What's going on?" The Reverend coughed hard, the sound distant and wet through the line. "Don't go down there," he said, almost whispering. "It's not the child you hear." Then the line went dead. That night she couldn't bring herself to stay. She packed her bags and left the house just before sunset. But as she reached the car, she realized she'd left something, her mother's old locket, sitting on the nightstand upstairs. For a long time, she stood by the car door, debating. Finally, she decided to go back in. Just for a minute. The house was dark and silent. She walked quickly down the hallway, her shoes creaking against the floorboards. When she reached the bedroom, the locket was exactly where she'd left it, next to the bed. She picked it up and turned to leave. And that's when she heard it again. From beneath her feet, that same thin, broken cry, the sound of a baby weeping. Except this time it was louder, closer, like it was right below her, in the walls. Nicole froze, every instinct telling her to run. But she didn't. She stepped quietly into the hallway, toward the laundry room. The basement door stood there in the dark, half illuminated by the moonlight coming through the window. The key was still in the lock from the last time she'd used it, and it was slowly turning on its own. The door creaked open about an inch. The crying stopped. Nicole stood perfectly still, eyes wide, breath held. The silence pressed against her eardrums like weight. Then, from the other side of that door, a single soft sound. "Mama!" The door swung open by itself. Cold air poured out, carrying that familiar scent of old rust and earth. Nicole stepped back, shaking, unable to speak. For a moment, she thought she saw something. A faint figure at the bottom of the stairs. Small, still. Then the light bulb above her flickered, once, twice, and went out. Everything went black. The next morning, Nicole's car was still parked outside. The lights in the house were off. Neighbors assumed she'd gone out of town. Weeks later, the property went up for sale again, quietly, through a private listing. A new family moved in not long after, with a baby girl. And the first review posted online for the house read, "It's a lovely home, quiet neighborhood. Only thing is, sometimes late at night, the baby monitor picks up another child crying." Michelle Brown had never planned on buying an old house. But when she saw a small 2-bedroom home for sale in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio, she couldn't resist the price. The house was modest, white paint fading on the siding, a cracked walkway, and a small fenced backyard. It looked ordinary, maybe too ordinary. She moved in during late spring. The first week went by fine, peaceful, quiet, almost too still. She repainted the walls, unpacked her furniture, and started feeling at home. There was only one part of the house she hadn't explored yet, a locked wooden door in the kitchen that led down to the basement. It had an old rusty padlock on it. The previous owner's note simply said, "Do not use." Michelle didn't think much of it. Old houses always had strange corners, right? 2 weeks later, things changed. At around 3 a.m., Michelle woke up suddenly. At first, she thought she heard someone shouting outside, a faint, muffled scream, like a voice echoing from underground. "Help!" She froze. It was quiet again, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Maybe a dream, she thought. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, 3 in the morning. Same faint voice coming from directly beneath her floor. "Help me." Michelle sat up in bed. The sound was distant, desperate, and it seemed to be coming from the direction of the kitchen, where that basement door was. Over the next few nights, she couldn't sleep. Every time the clock neared 3, she would start hearing it again. Sometimes a single scream, sometimes a low moan, sometimes even what sounded like scratching. She asked her neighbors if they'd ever heard anything strange. They just shrugged. One old man across the street said, "That house has been empty for years before you moved in." Nobody ever lasted there long. The more she ignored it, the worse it got. By the 5th night, Michelle had enough. She grabbed a hammer and a screwdriver from her garage and went to the kitchen. The gembok, the old padlock, came off easier than she expected, as if it had been opened before. A cold, musty draft escaped from below. The air smelled like damp concrete and iron. With her phone flashlight on, she started down the creaking wooden stairs. The basement was nearly empty. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Boxes and furniture were scattered along the walls. But in the far corner, behind a pile of broken chairs, something caught her eye. A small table with a brown envelope on top of it. The envelope had writing on it. "To whoever finds this house." Michelle hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a single piece of yellowed paper, folded twice. It was written in shaky handwriting. "My name is Henry Collins. I am, or was, the owner of this house. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I was robbed and killed in this very basement. They buried me under the floor. I wrote this note before they came back. If you hear me, please don't be afraid. I just want to be found." Michelle's flashlight flickered. She looked down at the concrete floor. One section near the middle looked darker, slightly uneven, as if it had been patched. Her heart started racing. Without thinking twice, she ran upstairs, grabbed a small shovel from her backyard shed, and came back down. The moment she dug into the concrete, a faint sound echoed through the basement. It wasn't just in her head this time. It was real. "Thank you." The words came from right beneath where she was digging. Her hands trembled as she chipped away the hardened cement. After a few minutes, her shovel hit something solid, not stone, but bone. The edge of a human hand, still wearing a faded gold ring. Michelle dropped the shovel and screamed. Her flashlight fell to the ground, spinning wildly, casting erratic shadows across the walls. She stumbled upstairs and called 911, barely able to form words. Within an hour, police arrived and sealed the area. Forensic teams confirmed it. Human remains, buried under the basement floor. Dental records later identified the body as Henry Collins, missing since 1997. He had been beaten and buried by robbers who were never caught. The case had gone cold for over 25 years. Michelle stayed in a hotel for the next few weeks. She told investigators she never felt threatened, only that someone was trying to get her attention. But something strange happened during those nights away. Every time she woke up, always around 3 a.m., she would feel that same heaviness in the air, as if someone was standing near her, watching. Eventually, the police closed the case, and Michelle decided to move back in. Her friends thought she was crazy. "You're really going back there?" one asked. "After what you found?" She smiled faintly. "I think he just wanted to be found. Maybe now he can rest." Michelle continued living in that same house. She never heard the screams again. The basement stayed quiet. Too quiet sometimes. But every year, on February 15th, the day Henry Collins was murdered, something unusual happens. At exactly 3 a.m., the single light bulb in the basement turns on by itself. It stays lit for about 5 minutes, and then turns off again. Michelle never touches that light. She says she doesn't need to, because she knows Henry Collins finally found peace. My name is Natalie Harris, and I live alone in a small house just outside of Wichita, Kansas. When I first moved in, I loved how quiet it was. A peaceful little suburban street with barely any traffic. The house was old, but cozy. The only thing that bothered me from the start was the door leading down to the basement. It's an old wooden door in the laundry room, its paint peeling, the handle covered in rust. Every time I walked past it, I could feel a faint draft of cold air leaking through the bottom. It wasn't scary at first, just strange. But a few months later, that basement became the reason I can't sleep peacefully anymore. It started around 2:45 in the morning. I woke up suddenly, not sure why, until I realized I could hear something moving below the floor. It sounded heavy, like someone dragging a piece of furniture across concrete. Then, silence. The next night, I heard it again. A slow, deep breathing sound coming from somewhere beneath me. At first, I thought it was the pipes, maybe air pressure, but it was too steady, too human. The sound came and went for almost a week. I started leaving the hallway light on at night. Sometimes when the house got completely quiet, I could hear what sounded like footsteps on the basement stairs. 2 or 3 slow steps, then nothing. Every time I walked toward the door, the noise stopped. A friend of mine, Sarah, stayed over one weekend. While we were watching TV late one night, she suddenly muted the volume and whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't, until I really listened. Somewhere under the floor, there was a faint crying sound, like a woman sobbing softly. Then, for a second, a man's low laugh seemed to echo after it. Sarah's face turned pale, and she refused to sleep alone that night. A few weeks later, curiosity got the best of me. It was almost 3 a.m. when I stood in front of that basement door, flashlight in hand, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The padlock was old, but it came loose after a few hits with a hammer. The moment I opened the door, a rush of freezing cold air came up from the dark below. The light flickered, and for just a split second, I saw something at the bottom of the stairs. Tall, almost touching the ceiling, standing perfectly still. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could tell it was looking right at me. Two faint red reflections, like eyes, staring through the dark. I dropped the flashlight and ran upstairs, slamming the door shut. When I looked back, the light from the flashlight had gone out completely. A few days later, I called a local priest, Father Coleman, to bless the house. He walked through every room quietly, but when he reached the basement door, he stopped completely. He put his hand on the doorknob, closed his eyes for a moment, then turned to me and said softly, "Whatever was open down there should never be opened again." He sprinkled holy water near the door and told me to keep it locked at all times. Since that day, I've chained the door shut. But the strange thing is, the noises haven't fully stopped. It's been almost 3 years now. The house looks normal in the daylight, calm and ordinary. But every once in a while, usually around 3 in the morning, I'll be watching TV or trying to sleep, and I'll hear it again. A soft, distant sound coming from the basement. I don't go near that door anymore, not because I'm scared of what's behind it, but because I know, deep down, it's still there, waiting for me to open it again.